Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
And what is going on? It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and you are turned into Turn a Page, the official comic book club for the Nerd Initiative. My name's Ken. Wait, this is wrong. Sorry. Ken and Rich are on assignment this week, so coming at 11 direct straight from the Sanctum of Awesome. My name's Off the Cuff Tom, Nerd Initiative's pop culture connoisseur. That's right, folks. We are here. They gave me the keys to the kingdom, and I'm talking comic books this week. I am talking about specifically Defenders of the Earth. That's right. Coming out from Mad Cave Studios, Dan Didio, and I hope I got that right because I know if I've heard how many people mess it up, I hope I did. We'll bring him on in a second. Has been writing an amazing run right now, featuring the likes of Flash Gordon, Mandrake the Magician, Lothar, and of course, the ghost that walks, the Phantom himself. So you know what? Without further ado, let's bring him on. Dan, thank you so very much for joining us tonight here on Turn a Page.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Two things. First of all, it's Didio, but you were close. That's all right. More people say it your way than my way. And number two is, how come the other guys get to go on assignment and you don't? That's what I'd like to know.
We switch out every once in a while. You know, we all have things. I think they have to do something. There was some cookies and Revenge of the Fifth. I don't know. I think they were. I don't know. Some Sith happened. So luckily I have been one championing this book over here at Nerd Initiative. So I have the absolute pleasure to get to talk with you tonight.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much. And I'm glad you've been enjoying it. I'm having a blast doing it. It's kind of fun and relaxing to be working on characters that you never had to deal with that much. So the fact that I didn't know them, I knew them from the animation. I really didn't know them from the books. I had to go in and do a lot of research and understand who they were. And it was a fascinating read. I really enjoyed that a lot. And it really helped bring things into the series as we go forward, you know?
So let's take a quick back step. Before you got to Mad Cave, you've had a very long career. You've worked at DC, you've done Frank Miller, you've done all kinds of stuff. What led you actually over to Mad Cave Studios?
Well, it's a funny story.
And that's what we're here for.
I was actually at San Diego Comic-Con, just walking around, and I was visiting Mike Martz, who's the senior editor or senior VP or whatever his title is now today over at Mad Cave. Got a chance to see him. We were playing catch-up. And he was telling me about the things that he was working on, and he knew my interest and love of animation because even before I did 20 years of comics, I did 20 years of television.
Yes, as a matter of fact, working on two of my favorite shows, Shadow Raiders and Reboot.
I was shocked you didn't say Beast Wars, but that's okay.
Everybody knows that one. Like,
everybody knows that one.
Let's go for the other mainframe shows.
But we were sitting there chatting. He brings me up. He starts talking about Defense of the Earth, and I'm listening to him, and I start just riffing some ideas for the series, and then I walk away, and I'm walking around the floor. Then I'd swing back around like an hour later, and I add some more story to it. And I think it was on the third or fourth trip back to the booth with an idea that he starts laughing at me. He goes, "You want to do this?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Now, because, you said it yourself, you did work in animation and TV for a long time. What do you think about all the other series that are in the Saturday morning cartoons line from Mad Cave?
It's a fascinating because I always look, everything we do is so nostalgia driven now. And it's intriguing to start to see different areas being mined for ideas, and you're seeing this big push in film coming off of video games, but also you're seeing this big push for comics coming out of animation. And while I was at DC, we saw some of that with things like Thundercats, and we saw how that worked. I had a particular fun run at DC when we started to get my hands on the Hanna-Barbera and the Looney Tunes characters, and to get them to mix and match with the DC characters, and then also do new styles and interpretations of those characters was a dream come true. So I've always been interested in the animation material. I always think it makes the natural progression, and if it want to be back, it probably goes back to me as a kid. I get into comics probably because I watched the Spider-Man cartoon, gets me into the Spider-Man comics, and it moves me out through there. So I think there's a natural association between the two. So it's great to be able to take these really exciting worlds that we hear and finding a way to blow them out more, especially if we haven't seen them for a while, or we think there's a lot more story to be told with them.
It's funny you mentioned about your time working with the Looney Tunes and whatnot. We do have earmarked that whenever the day that Turn a Page falls on April Fool's Day, it is earmarked that I get to do Elmer Fudd Batman.
There you go.
It is
There you
set
go.
in stone. But we're
Yeah.
talking about what we're doing over at Med Cave right now. And like I said, you are covering and writing the Defenders of the Earth yourself, and then Jim Calafiore, Guancho Veliz, and Carlos Mangual. Hopefully I got that all right.
Yep. Got
Uh,
him right.
are
Except Didio. That's the only one.
that guy, just you guys are writing and working as a wonderful dream team, just like the Defenders, writing this book and the art and the style. So let's like really get into it. Now, obviously, it was like a snowball effect at at the
Yeah.
like, all right, well, okay, I guess we'll do this. But and you said you've also done your research. Now, you've worked with some guy in the past named Kal-El. What's it like working with particularly the Phantom and Flash Gordon, who are slightly older than that guy? Was there?
Yeah, it's interesting because the project, one of the projects I was doing before I got into this was I was working on the book on the history of Street and Smith, which got me into the world of pulps. I was involved. I was reading and learning about Doc Savage and Shadow and the Whisperer and so many different other characters, and I loved learning that, and I love going back to these characters that were actually so much of the inspiration and ideas for all the kids that ultimately want to start working on and making comic books in the 1930s. So it was fun to see and work on the Phantom, and particularly Mandrake and Flash. And what's weird about it is for Mandrake and the Phantom, I wasn't that familiar with them, to be honest. My local papers did not have those character strips available to me, so I never really was exposed to it. Flash to me was a comic strip book that my sister bought years earlier that I just dove into and kept. I still have that same book now.
Awesome.
And I knew him from the serial. So I knew bits and pieces here and there. So once I got into it and you start to learn the lore, it was spectacular. But honestly, my first introduction to the Phantom was actually the DC
Billy
Comics
Zane?
Peter David interpretation.
Okay. I mean, you might have me by a year or two, so I'm just going to say my first introduction was, of course, Billy Zane. So
Okay, there you go. Yeah. And actually, a very underrated movie, I think.
Indeed. Well, technically, it was Defenders, but as the Phantom as a standalone, it was Billy
exactly.
Zane. Now, with this being a very, very, and I love the fact that it's a continuation of the story from the cartoon, we've had a big time skip, and the kids are like very grown up now. Was that something that you felt that you really wanted to get in there to tell a more dynamic story?
Oh, I think so. I think what you really want to do is you want to really build the kids as their own, and they had to be the story. And for me, in some ways, they had to be the story generators. They're the ones that could have the real emotional arcs. They're the ones you could really take through and really explore and change them as you go forward. I think that's the thing that I loved about it, because they became the ones that you could tell the story through, and their eyes became my eyes and ears to the rest of the world of those characters. Because you're dealing with licensed product, you only have so much flexibility about what you can and can't do with the really established heroes. So you want to take a lot more risk and turn with some of the characters that you can actually play around a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I thought the dynamics of these characters was spectacular. And for me, what was interesting is that when I first started, I did an outline, a full outline of what I wanted my story to be and story beats and ideas. And then, talk about research, I went back and I watched all 65 half hours of Defenders of the Earth. I actually did it over a period of time, just doing it. And the thing that I felt good about was that I felt a lot of the themes that I was bringing to the book are ideas that they touched upon in the course of the series. And so I was able to capture the spirit of the series and be able to take things that they might have done, but find a way to interpret them in a way that was felt new and fresh for this particular story I was telling.
That's fantastic. Now, speaking of all these characters and, having licensing and, the older characters having their Bibles right there with them, what do you think has been difficult writing for those characters versus, say, writing for the younger characters?
Well, there's a lot of things that you can, as anything. Listen, I came from a world of Superman and Batman, so there's a lot of cans and cans and can't do's. So I'm very comfortable with that, and I know what the expectations are on that. And to be perfectly honest, the type of book I like to write is this type of book. I'm not really trying to reinterpret the wheel. I'm not trying to reinvent this. I'm really not trying to give this really dystopic interpretation of every character. I was just trying to give a story where I felt there was real stake in odds that gave a little sense of threat for these characters to be facing with. So you want to be, and you want to make sure they're being challenged. The other thing that's fascinating about this particular book and this set of characters are they're so opposites of each other. You would never expect this team to come together. One's a magic story, one is a high-end science fiction story, one's a much more grounded, in the jungle or urban type of story. So you get these three very different types of tones of characters, and by bringing them all together, you have to find ways that they can all interact in a story that they normally wouldn't naturally participate in. You know what I mean? And you got to find that reason. And I think that's the wonderful challenge about it. And you're finding ways to make sure you keep the characters' sensibility and uniqueness intact while bringing them into situations where other people are the lead, is a tricky balance. And then if you go back and look at the series, not surprisingly, so much of it's built around Flash Gordon's world. It's, it's his villain, his world, a lot of these things around here. And really the other characters are playing in Flash Gordon's space. And if you start to look over the course of the series, you'll see that everybody has their moment to shine in their own little environments. So therefore, it's about all of them in their own worlds and how everybody works together and supports each other as different characters take the lead in particular stories.
And that's true. Just having the 8-issue run, you've done so well making sure that everybody gets their particular highlight and that there's a great through line that, oh, well, hey, we're focusing over here. Like I just put up the Phantom right there. But yes, we still have that solid foundation with Flash Gordon. So kudos to you on that for just being able to make it as seamless as possible.
Well, that's something that I used to push for all the time at DC, and especially in team books. I feel every character on a team has to have a moment in that book to remind you why he's there or remind you who he is. If you don't do that and they're just standing around in the backgrounds, I hated nothing more than a scene where you see 500 characters all lined up shoulder to shoulder, acting homogenous, because you lose their sense of uniqueness and what makes them special. So you always want to remind folks what makes these indie characters special in every issue, not just once in a while. And the other thing you can't do is take it for granted that the audience knows everything about these characters and let them fill in the blanks. I feel it should be on the page more so than letting the other people do the thinking for me,
And that's a great key thing to go into, Did you start this book, solely based on the nostalgia aspect of getting folks like myself who still have that, song as their ringtone, or to bring in that whole new generation? I heard once that if you use a song or especially a theme song for your alarm, that is your theme song for the day. I'm not going to confirm nor deny that this might have been one of my alarms.
Well, if you like the theme song, there's a special treat for you in issue number 7. That's all I got to say. I leaned into it there. It was funny. It's funny you say that, because that was the one thing out of the series when I told people I was working on this book. That was the one thing everybody brought up was the theme song. And honestly, it wasn't stuck in my head until I watched 65 half hours of it.
Well, apparently somebody had missed New York Comic Con and phoned it in, but we were all singing theme songs during the Mad Cave panel. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not going to say who phoned it in.
Yeah, no. Yeah. You know what? It was funny during the Frank Miller days. I did a big push on conventions, and I probably overextended myself. And I have to admit, I'm taking a little bit of a convention break, taking a little time off.
Understandable. Now, speaking of all, everybody getting their time to shine, what character have you most related to that you wanted to really develop?
It's weird.
Zuffy. Okay, gotcha.
I look at it's honestly, when you're writing the Phantom, I feel like I have a responsibility to write the Phantom. So I feel like there's an obligation that I'm writing, that there's so many people out there and there's such a strong Phantom base that I feel that I have an obligation to write it a certain way and make sure that I treat it properly. With Flash Gordon, there's other Flash Gordon books, so I don't feel that same sense of urgency. I need him to be the engine because he's the it's like I said, it's his story that drives a lot of the bits and pieces of what's going on here. So you want to make sure he's involved as the engine, but for me, he doesn't have to take center stage everywhere because he has other books. So therefore, if somebody's dying for that Flash Gordon fix, he has other places to find it within Mad Cave. So strangely, I'm locking into Mandrake and Lothar. And that's the fun part. Mandrake has probably been more fun to write, and I just started putting a lot of personality in it and a lot of things that I think would be funny. And lo and behold, it actually tracked with so much Mandrake material, and actually sat down with the people from the King Feature Syndicate, who are the rights holders, and they were very happy with it. So that made me feel good. And my other goal was to make Lothar much stronger on his own right, and to really grow him out and give him more backstory there, which has been fun because there's a lot of opportunity with that character, and he has just the longest history as Mandrake. So you want to make sure you treat him in the same manner.
Yeah, I think that what Defenders has done and what you've done as well is that they've really given him time to shine. He's not the sidekick. He's not just the muscle. He is just as equal as anybody else on the team.
Oh yeah, I'm having a lot of fun. I brought an ex-wife in now, who's now the chieftain of the country, and I found really great. Bringing her brought a new dynamic to his relationship, because you can see the level of, he was getting frustrated with Mandrake, and then he's trying to work through that, and then he gets frustrated with somebody else. You can see that he's just trying to do the right thing and fighting against his true nature, which is to be the king of the Seven Nations.
It's really fun to do this. What have been some things that as you're writing, you just have that aha moment, and then you go, can I get away with this? And what have you gotten away with so far?
Well, probably cutting off Ming's head on the first chapter by the way, that was my pitch. That was in the pitch. So as soon as they said that was okay to start the story, I'm like, okay, we're off to the races. The thing that was interesting for me was developing Dale more as a person than just as an AI. I thought that was the huge missed opportunity from the animation. She's such an integral part of Flash Gordon's story. And what happens is, if you look at the animation, they kill her in the first episode. They don't say kill her, but she's dead at the end of the first episode of the cartoon series. And then she becomes an AI, but they don't really play that relationship. And I wanted to explore that relationship of what it was, and play the comic book twists and turns that come along with something like that, which is what that's the fun. And there's a couple of things I want to do that got shot down, but that's okay. That's what I remember being the guy shooting things down, so it's actually fun. But the goal was that the story was moving so naturally that everything seemed to make sense. My one fun moment though was I had this double page spread in my mind, and I couldn't visualize it. I just couldn't figure it out. You know what I mean? I couldn't figure. And when you're working full script, you got to lay it all out in a way the artist can draw. And for me, I was much more of an outline guy. I like giving the outline and letting the artist figure out how the visualization lays down, because they're much more visual than I am. And I was I forgot if I was at a convention or somewhere. I was with Jim Calafiore, and I'm telling him the scene, and I'm telling him I can't figure it out. And within a minute, he takes out a little piece of paper, here, and it's that double page spread where a Phantom is swinging up the trees to catch a helicopter. And I couldn't figure out how the motion would move upward, if he's starting low, and he did it brilliantly. And he showed it to me, and I went, huh. Took a paper, folded up, put it in my pocket, and literally, when I turned in the script, I attached his drawing. I said, "This is what I want," and that worked out really well. But that's the fun part of all these collaborations is, seeing what people are adding to it. And for the big finale, I always had this one visualization for the big finale that I'm still waiting to see how that all comes together, because it's a little ridiculous. So
we can talk about that after I turn off the recording.
Yeah.
But that's the other big thing. You do have these great collaborations, with Jim and whatnot. But the best part is that you have these fantastic covers. And I only did the first 4. I just want to do the heroes.
Yeah.
We have all these great, action figure covers. I personally was never a huge fan of the action figure covers until I saw these ones particularly. Like, these were done up so well. What was it
Well,
like
I'm
for
like,
you?
is that a photo? What am I looking? Honestly, I was staring at it. I didn't even know what I was looking at for a little while. I'm like, are those the toy cards? No, but that's the artist did a brilliant job putting that together. Brilliant.
It's just so good. Like, I had to stop and really go, wait a minute, is that real or not? And I'm just saying, Super Seven, whatnot, whoever, get on these.
Yeah, no, listen, I think that's great. Like I said, there's so much enjoyment for me working on these characters because it feels so, honestly, because they're so old, they feel so fresh. And also
Yes.
because they're just not so over the top. They're all so grounded in a certain way. I mean, I keep on pushing Mandrake's magic, but I always try to push his magic as if it's based on an actual magic trick. Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean? So that way, at least it has some basis in a reality. And so when he does it, it becomes fantastic. Like, the whole thing with the purple door and and that was the one scene when we folded up the mansion. I'm like, I wonder if people are going to buy this, but I didn't get much complaint on that, which was kind of fun. It was actually I had a lot of fun putting that together. I thought it was just odd.
Look, you pulled a Naboo on it. All right, we're gonna say it. You just,
Yeah,
but the fact that you had, and we're gonna hear spoiler, folks, that the Phantom was, tied to the house, very much like we know from other houses over at
yeah.
that other company. That just added such a great, like, he's the ghost that walks. He's
Well,
he's supposed to be everywhere in the jungle, and he's stuck in the house.
that's what I said. That was the horror of it all, and I love the concept of Ghost Who Walks. I said, can we play that ghost part just for a little while? And I wanted him to be this ghost walking in a house that wasn't his own. He wanted, and hopefully we got across the point that he wanted to be out there. He wanted to be with his daughter, and that separation created an angst that ultimately came in. And then I realized that there was, when I found out he was the 27th Phantom. Then I get that beautiful double page spread of the 27 Phantoms. And again, the
So
100%
good.
goes to Jim on that. He found a way to design each one of them to a unique point so they all had a different personality. And I talk about this from the DC days. I had this long talk with Jim Lee one time. We were talking about X-Men. And he was talking about every time he drew X-Men, um, every character was doing something different. Somebody would be smoking, somebody would be drinking, somebody would be sitting, somebody would be standing, but he wanted to make sure everybody wasn't doing the same thing. And the fact that Jim went in and found a way to make all these phantoms look different made me realize it gives it a much more richer history, because in theory, each phantom in some way should be reflective of the time that he was on patrol, of the one in charge. And it's good that they take on different types of trinkets or things that are on them that would be part of who they are, so they
Mhm.
would be, and so they would deal whoever they're dealing with in a much different way than just the same way over and over again. And I like that sense of uniqueness. Again, it goes back to like the things of Green Lantern and all these things. People said, oh, why would you want all these the same? And I said, they're only the same if you write them the same. They're all different if you give them personalities and take the time to look and see who they are as individuals. And that's what we started to do with some of those phantoms when we did that story.
Now, speaking of staying with the times, what was it like for you? What aspects of the stories have you modernized successfully? I mean, yes, we did have technology and whatnot, back in the original cartoon, but how did you try to do your best to track it and update it, since then?
It's more an attitudinal change than it is a visual change, because it's
Hmm.
supposed to be in the future and we're dealing with other planets, and other technologies. You're always going to have that to work with. So for me, it was more about how would people think, and I'm always fascinated by the world and what happens in the world. And the reality is, you see people with technology all the time, and in some ways, you see the technology be this this disconnect with reality. The technology becomes a reality that becomes your world, and the world that exists around you. As long as it doesn't intrude in my space, I'm fine, because I can exist in my technology. And that's what I was trying to show, is that sooner or later that technology is going to come back and bite you. And the fact that somebody's controlling it means they're controlling you, even if you're not aware of it. And I think that's a real issue. And if you want to give up that sense of humanity or freedom because you just want that connection to the technology, you got to show the good sides and the bad sides of it. And that's what that story's exploring. And the defenders are basically saying, you got to come out of that, and I'm going to help you out of that. I'm going to try to help you, even if you don't want to be helped, because at the end of the day, it's for your good. And we believe this is for the good of mankind. So, and there's a challenge to that. You got to show some of the downsides of things as well as the upsides. So you really start to question whether or not they're doing the right thing or not. And at the end, you start to see that it is the right thing for them to do because of how Crotan was going to use this technology against them ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's just talk about this. You said about technology and everything, and you took care of Ming in the first issue, which absolutely blew me away. But then as I'm scrolling through, there was also this very special, and folks, here you go, get your phones out, especially if you're watching this on your TVs. There was that great QR code that I'm going to throw up here because, those of us here at Nerd Initiative, we love our QR codes.
Yes.
You can actually go and read the issue 0 prologue that I wish I would have just done a quick thumb through real quick on the first issue. Yeah. But then I go through the first issue and then I go back to that and I'm hooked. I mean, I was already hooked, but I'm now line and sinker when I read that. So, doing it in the digital aspect and also on the paneled page, have you come to find any differences when you're writing or trying to develop, or how you like a layout?
I would, if I was writing for digital, I would write completely differently, because I would write in a manner that would be easier to scroll and read rather than turn a page to read. It's just
said the thing.
What? Yeah, what's that?
You said the thing. Turn a page.
Yeah, it's just, and that's the reason why I would do that. That preview was built for a book. It just didn't land in it, so that's one of the reasons it was on the digital code from there. But what was good about that, it allowed me 4 pages just to get a feel of the characters before diving into the first issue, which is good. You got to sort of work out the voices as you go. And honestly, I can tell you truthfully, it wasn't until there was things that I liked in the first 3 issues, but I really started to get comfortable and started really getting comfortable with the characters by the time I got to 4. I was really in a groove by that point. Had a lot of fun with it, the Flash stuff, and I realized that the energy and excitement, I had to really start to amp that up and want this to be really as action-packed as you would be watching a show, a series.
And I got to say, the Flash stuff, as you're talking about, to see how he's involved with technology and how, disenchanted he is with the world because, he's lost his wife and everything. It just how stuck he was in his own rut, and how you've taken one of the longest and oldest characters that a lot of people know, in the comic lexicon, and you've put him in a box.
Oh yeah.
And for him to break out, that was just so impactful. As someone, like I said, pop culture, I know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. And then to do that, it really caught me off guard, and kudos to that.
Yeah. And again, it was because I had that. What's great about it is that everybody was worried at the start about how this book would interact with the other Flash books and all that. And Defenders is its own beast. It's its own series. I mean, it was gracious enough for them to give me 2 short stories in the Flash Gordon quarterly, which I got a chance to explore. Dale in one, and then I explored Ming in the second one. And I had fun doing that because I wanted to, it was a blast doing that, and it was fun to be able to play that. And it gave the twists and turns to show how Flash was being manipulated, because I feel Flash is such a strong character. He wouldn't be so boxed in unless there was external forces about him, and you start to see that all peeled away for the big 2-part finale, which is 7 and 8 really lay out as a really one big slam bang, knock them down, no holds barred battle scene between 2 issues, nonstop action from the start of 7 to the end of number 8.
As much as I'm down for all the action, focusing on Flash's backstory, honestly, that just all the feelings right in there. Made me miss my dad, I'll be honest.
No, and you know what, and that was important to me. The father. If you want to know the truth, is what I lean into the kids so much. I wanted that father-son relationship. I really wanted to play that. I wanted to show it in different sets. There's a moment. I forget. Honestly, I'm reading all the issues at the same time, so now I'm confused. There's a moment where Kashin meets with Mandrake, and he's crushed. And it's a great, simple scene between Mandrake and Kashin that defines their whole relationship. And also Kashin's relationship with Flash in an interesting way, because he was working for him at the headquarters. So I thought that was fun to do. I wanted to have, everybody had to have a different relationship also. It couldn't be the same. The Flash and Rick are both dealing with the loss of the mother, and how do we reconcile that? LJ's dealing with dysfunctional parents. How do I reconcile that?
Royal dysfunctional parents.
Yeah, which is royal, exactly. And he's a kid. He's just a regular kid, basically trying to, just trying to make sure mom and dad don't kill each other. And then I go to Jeddah, who's angry at her father for abandoning her and ultimately making bad choices because of that. So that's an important story. And then Kashin basically forsakes and walks away from magic to try to find his own destiny, and ultimately doesn't find it, and he's lost. And then how do I get back from that? So again, everybody has their story. That's why the kids were fun, because they could play off the parents being who they are and still have these good emotional stories with each one of them, and supportive parents every step of the way. That was the main thing too. This isn't about, kids fighting with each other. It's about people who love each other trying to figure out their relationships,
Mm-hmm. Now, the one obviously who doesn't have a relationship is really Crotan. I mean, how far did you want to go with him? Like, you got to play my dad's dead, I'm the bad guy kid. Like,
we explore Crotan and Ming's relationship full bar in the Flash Gordon Quarterly. That's
okay.
They explain, we know who they are and how they relate to each other right there, and that's the heart of it all. And Crotan, in some ways, thinks he's smarter, as he should, than his father. He's not there subservient to him. He's trying to be better than him in different ways, and be smarter with them, and try to see the mistakes his father made and try to improve on that. And he's laid out this very complicated takeover plan of both Earth and Mongo that's coming to fruition right now. And at the end, he reverts to being like his father, and ultimately that takes him down a different path.
It's so much fun to see how much joy you're putting into this book, because you can get it off the page. Honestly, we've all read comics where that they're just cranking just to make the pages and get it out. They got their deadlines, but to have these books come out every single month, and for me, I'm like, where's my book? Where's my book? Where's my book? It's joyous.
It's an interesting thing. I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little weird. I didn't have to do this book. I wanted to do this book. Do you know what I mean?
That makes the difference.
And that is the difference. I've had things brought to me, and I've talked to people. That sense of urgency just to do something isn't the driving force anymore. Keeping myself busy is important, but keeping my busy things that I enjoy doing and I feel that I could grow from or learn new challenges from. That's what's important to me. It's a stage of life, stage of career, stage of whatever. Regardless of how old you are, of what you've accomplished, you always should be trying to do things that make you feel that you grow a little bit more. And I feel that by working on characters that I wasn't familiar with and telling stories with them, that it allowed me to grow a little bit more, because it helped me round out the things that I know and learn from. I didn't want to go back and repeat something. I'd rather go back and I'd rather go out and try something new. And if you fail, you fail. But the goal is you always got to be trying to push yourself to do something new and different instead of just resting and looking backwards.
Now, I do have two more questions for you. Okay. Sure. Number one, a lot of comic series, miniseries, even nowadays, are 4 or 5 issues. Sometimes you might get a 6. Was the fact that 4 become 8 defending the Earth happen to be why we got 8 issues out of this?
4 become 1 collecting the Mad Cave universe is how it really works.
Okay, fair enough. I was hoping there was an in joke there, because
no, trust me, you got it next issue. I promise you'll have it in number 7. You get 3 big cartoon call outs in number 7. 3 big ones.
All right, fair enough.
Now, one of the ones that everybody's been asking me about, I said I've been building towards it. I didn't want to rush it, and I'm glad I didn't. It landed perfectly in number 7.
So that means, folks, you got to make sure that you go out and get issue number 7. While you're at it, go back and get all the other ones.
I'm hoping people are reading it. I mean, it's fun for me. It's again, what I like to do is entertained. This is about entertainment. This is about enjoyment,
It is.
entertainment. You know, it's as much as it plays into nostalgia, it's not a nostalgia play. Meaning, it's not supposed to be just to scratch that itch of something that it pre-existed before. It really is there to hopefully grow and move on from there. I don't know if new people will find it. I hope they do, because it's written in a way that was extraordinarily accessible
It
to
is.
anybody who it was completely unfamiliar with Defenders of the Earth. You know.
I mean, I've given an issue to my wife just to thumb through. I mean, thumb through digitally. But she's like, "Oh yeah, I remember the cartoon. I never watched it, but this is cool. I like this."
Yeah.
If I can get a cool out of my wife, I've done my job.
Got to show me how that's done. No, I'm kidding.
Man, I'm on number 2, so trust me. But what else do we have? Like, are we? I don't know if we could go there, but is this all we're going to see of you writing for Defenders? Are we going to maybe?
I think
If
if we had a magic 8 ball, I say future looks good.
Okay,
For a
we'll
little
look
more,
into
a little
Mandrake's
more.
hat for it. Okay.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
yeah. I'm having a lot of fun. You know, what was good is that I had a bigger story, and then I sort of brought it down,
Mhm.
and I exercised a section that I thought was important to the story. But honestly, at the end of the day, it was much better without it, and I was able to encapsulate that part of the story separately. So we'll see whether or not we can push that going forward. But I feel good about it. I feel good about it. I'm enjoying the characters. I wouldn't want to do more if I didn't enjoy it, and I'm having a lot of fun. So I think they realize that too over at Mad Cape, hopefully, and we could do a little more with this.
Now, outside of Defenders, what other projects are you working on currently?
Well, you know what? Like I said, my background was animation, so I was trying to get back into animation for a while. I got about 2 or 3 animated pitches that are sitting with an agent right now, waiting for that business to wake up again. It's been a little quiet there. Hope, fingers crossed. I feel that there's a real loss without new cartoons coming out, I have to say. But actually, I had a 2-book. I did a prose novel a couple of years back. I had a 2-book deal. I'm turning in that manuscript. Fingers crossed, the end of this month. So that's the second one being done, which I'm very happy about, and we'll see how that goes. You know, that's a long, arduous process. Again, it was pushing myself out of a comfort zone. I did the first book. I had a couple of people help me structure it, because I really had to get the timing and rhythm of writing a novel down. And I had some, it was a different pacing than everything else I had done. After working in animation and
No
comics
pictures.
and
I get
such.
it.
Yeah, and once I did that, so this one I did myself. Probably took me twice as long as the first one, naturally, but it's extraordinarily much more fulfilling, I have to say. And it's been intriguing to exist and writing in a bubble for months on end, with absolutely no feedback, and then look at this big body of work going, is anybody going to like this? Is anybody going to read this or not? It's pretty disconcerting, but I have to admit, it was great to be building a world and building characters and getting so involved in them that I didn't care. Even if I was the sole audience, I feel very very satisfied in ultimately the process and the result. You know.
Well, Dan, first and foremost, best of luck with all the pitches that are everything, all the coals in the iron. Congratulations on such a successful run with Mad
I
Cave
appreciate
and
that. Thank you.
Defenders of the Earth. So, folks, like I said, make sure that you head out to your local comic book shop. Go and pick up Defenders of the Earth. You are going to have an absolute blast with this book. Seriously, if you got to go, just go out to your comic book, support.
Good.
So.
Hopefully.
Oh no, trust me.
Go. You go.
Yeah, just go. And we're just gonna end it like we always do. When you're at the comic book shop and you see someone searching around figuring what do they want, and you got a great issue in your hand, like Defenders of the Earth, hand it off to them and tell them, turn a page. We'll catch you in the next one. I'm out.